Hello and welcome to episode 5, Justice for All's podcast called Connections with Coffee. My name is Joel DeWitt, Executive Director at Justice for All. I have Debbie VantHul with me, who is the Executive Director at Love Inc. Welcome, Debbie.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
All right. So just to kind of give folks an idea about who you are a little bit, and maybe if you could share how long you've been at Love Inc., and any other questions that I might have after that. Kind of start a little background about you and about how you got to be at Love Inc.
Sure. So I've been at Love Inc. since 2011, but I started in a different role. So I was actually hired. My oldest son was graduating from high school, and my kids were getting older, and I kind of felt, what's next for me? So I talked to my husband. I was going to look for a job. And kind of went a different route. And then I saw something in our church bulletin about love in the name of Christ. And I was intrigued. I thought, that could be interesting. So I actually interviewed to be an administrative assistant to the executive director at the time, Arlene Van. And I was offered that job, but it was about 8 hours a week. And I said to my husband, that's not really even a job, is it? And I said, but I really love the mission and vision and the idea of love in the name of Christ. So he encouraged me to take it. I kind of I thought if I'm going to go back to work, I want to do something different than I'd done before and something that I felt passionate about.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads me to, what did you do before that?
So years ago, I attended Dordt University for administrative assistant type work.
Oh, okay.
So secretarial type work. I worked in a bank in Sioux Center for years. I actually worked for the Rock Valley Chamber briefly. I actually worked for Home Health at Hague Hospital briefly.
Oh, all right.
With the second child, decided maybe it would stay home. My husband farms, and if you know farmers, that's like almost 2 full-time jobs. So for many years, I was able to be home with my family,
which
awesome. I feel very blessed to have raised 3 children.
I was going to ask how many.
3,
All right.
And then I did some book work for my husband's uncle's trucking business from home. Got very involved with Coffee Break in Rock Valley, helped start that here, and gave a lot in my church, so I felt like I could use gifts that way. But that's my background.
Sure. Well, that's awesome. Did you grow up around here?
I did not. I grew up in central Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
Green Bay Packers are my team. They just really trounced the Cowboys, so that was exciting.
That did happen,
Could be a fluke. We'll see. But no, I grew up in central Wisconsin, and I attended Dordt.
Yeah.
Did you go
to a Christian school in Wisconsin?
So interesting. I grew up in a Christian Reformed church, but very not other Christian Reformed churches in the area near us. Probably an hour away was the closest one. So a little different than Sioux County setup with a lot of CRC and Reformed churches.
Very, very CRC
very
heavy
much.
in the county. Yeah.
But it was a Christian Reformed church, and there was not a Christian school in the area at that time.
Okay.
But my mom's best friend was they were Lutheran, and they had a great Lutheran grade school. So I always tell people I'm part Lutheran, part Christian Reformed, and then now I'm a mix because I work with so many churches with Love Inc. So I really don't identify a certain way that way. But so I went to a Lutheran grade school, and then through 8th grade, and from there I went through public high school.
Okay,
so,
all right. Ended up at Dordt College then.
Yeah. My mom went to Dordt. She was in the first graduating class, actually, and they really wanted me to go. And I do have one family connection. My aunt and uncle live in Hull, so my mom's sister. So I had a little bit of family. Which was great. She was my second mom. She still is my second mom, I
Probably
would
had
say.
some homesickness, I would imagine, if you're that far away when you're young.
I had terrible
those sort of
homesickness. I was ready to go, and then I thought, wow, they did actually do a lot for me.
Yeah.
So back to Love Inc. I was hired there as the administrative assistant, and the first week I can remember I came home and I said to my husband, I said, well, I will do fine with that, and I'm happy to help the executive director in whatever way I can. But I said, there's we call it now the call center. I'm like, boy, that job, I hear her talking on the phone to people that are struggling and things. I'm like, I really think I could do that job. And he said, well, you never know. So God had a hand in that. So never
absolutely.
know turned out to be 3 months that gal decided to retire.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so Arlene asked if I would like that job, and I said I would absolutely love to try that.
Well, 3
job.
months isn't a terribly long time, so that you didn't have to wait too long. So
I didn't.
maybe that would be something. I guess what I think is go into a little bit about loving, sort of what you mentioned, the call center. What is, if you can just go over some of the parts of the ministry.
Yeah. So in the call center, Love Inc. is a national organization. So we are one of around 130 affiliates across the United States. So all of those affiliates have the same mission, vision, core values, core principles.
Okay.
We have a national presence. We have an online platform. We engage very much between affiliates. We have some affiliates in our neighborhood here in Sheldon, in Canton, Worthington, a new one in Lenox Parker area. And I actually think Mitchell, South Dakota is inquiring about starting an affiliate. So there's the call center is probably the heart of it, because that's where we meet our neighbors that call in for a myriad of reasons.
Sure.
As you know, in nonprofit work, there's a lot of different challenges that people are dealing with. So it can vary very greatly.
So typically people will call it, like, can you give any sort of, examples a little bit about what folks are calling about? So I mean, it can be things like food, food need, furniture, which JFA comes in very keenly and often with. So we partner in that way. That's, beds are a thing, couches are a thing. Getting set up in a home. Okay.
Also, we have classes now. So like now we are getting a lot of calls. We're encouraging people to learn about budgeting.
Okay.
That has proven to be something we've learned a lot with people have not had the opportunity to learn those skills.
Okay.
And so we can help with that.
Is that something that is part of the national program of Love Inc., or is that something that you found as you were working here that, like, hey, this is a niche, this is a spot where we can help more folks? That
really is a national thing that they have encouraged affiliates. It's not necessarily the first thing you would start if your affiliate is new.
Okay.
They would want you to get that call center set up so that you can deal with some of those neighbors that are calling in. And then we have a tier called Gap Ministries, which are things like a food pantry. We have a home essentials resource here in town. That can be like a rides ministry, things where it's very much engaging the churches in that.
Okay.
And so those are some first things. Gap Ministries across Love Inc., there's probably 75 to 80 different things. They really encourage you to look at your demographic. Like what is a gap in your community that maybe you could do. Some affiliates do bike ministries and bike repairs. Some do help people move. There's just a myriad of things that you could grasp and say, hey, we see that as a need in our area.
Okay.
And then you would the next tier is what we call transformational ministry, which is classes.
Okay.
We've named ours Love and Learn classes,
Sure.
but each affiliate might call their program something different.
Sure.
But it's all similar. So there's a lot of interaction with other Love Incs. When, hey, have you done a parenting class?
Okay.
Or have you done like the boundaries class?
How many different classes are there? So you got parenting, you got
lots
boundaries.
Of different classes, faith and finances.
Okay.
We are a host for Grief Share.
Oh, okay.
Grief Share is its own thing. It's a national curriculum, and it's a nonprofit.
But you have to be trained in something about it.
We had to be trained. We had to be accepted into that, and actually they don't give the rights, even though we're a 501c3, they only give that to churches. So we have a church in Rock Valley that agreed to be our host, you'd say.
So they're like the sponsor.
That's kind of on
thing.
paper at this point. Yeah. I mean, we run the program, but yes, we had to be trained by their people. And we have done a class called Affirming Potential, which we're not holding right now. That is kind of looking at the 4 areas of people's life: their emotional well-being, spiritual well-being, physical well-being, and relational well-being.
Okay.
We've also done parenting. We're not holding this session, but each affiliate can kind of decide what they want
Sure.
to do. There isn't any requirement. Faith and Finances is one that Love Inc. in development with the Chalmers Center. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
I have heard of that.
We have copyrighted material that we use
Okay.
for Faith and Finances.
Okay.
That's probably our most involved class because we have mentors in that.
How often do you run them multiple times a year,
Yep.
or what does that look like?
So we're starting our session January 30. So we have a January session that starts run for 12 weeks.
Okay.
And then we usually start the very end of August and run it in the fall. So two times a year. We run
12
class
weeks at a
sessions,
time?
12 weeks at a time. Yep.
You need some help with that. I mean, I would imagine there's a volunteer part, there's a
wow.
mentor part. Like that's a fairly big
And
undertaking
you
for 3 months.
You
Yeah.
understand volunteers, and we're both very blessed with volunteers.
Oh yeah.
But there's always room for more, right?
There is room for more. Certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly. So how many classes? Faith and Finance, a parenting class, like you would just, depending on how the conversations go from the call center, or how do those classes become available? Or like, if you don't mind me asking, trying to figure that out a little bit.
We advertise that through churches mostly, but we also, that's not true. We advertise with local agencies. So other providers in the county will promote our classes for us too, but the churches also do.
Okay.
Our volunteer base is obviously coming from churches,
Yeah.
Just like you. And everybody who facilitates a class or mentors or watches children or makes the snack, all of those people are volunteers.
Okay.
So participants come sometimes from the churches, they come sometimes from calling just in, and they sometimes come from other agencies, so it's all of those things.
Okay. All right. What can you articulate a little bit what the Love Inc. is? How does it connect? Like what's at the heart of Love in the Name of Christ? Like how do you connect to people, or what's the main? I'm not articulating this question very well. What's the mission, I guess maybe is a better way to ask that, of Love Inc.?
The mission of Love Inc. is to mobilize local churches to transform lives and communities in the name of Christ.
All right.
So when I say
mobilize local churches.
Churches, we break that down. Usually when I speak in front of churches, I break down our mission because it's like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So it means we serve the church first.
Okay.
And many people say, well, you're a helping agency. Okay, true. But we, our main goal is to work with the churches. And the reasoning behind Love Inc. starting years ago with a man named Virgil Golker was that he felt churches weren't connected in a way to people can go from church to church asking for help sometimes.
Oh, I see.
But even beyond that, it's like the church can't necessarily handle all of the extra issues that come up, in the sense that you can do some things internally. You can help, deacons can help with financial things and that. But if there's a deeper issue, the church isn't equipped, but there are other ministries that are equipped to help. So how do you connect all of that together? Be connected rather than disjointed. So our goal is to encourage and equip and connect with churches as they carry out God's mandate in the Bible to love God and your neighbor as yourself.
Okay.
We're not the church. We're not here to replace the church. We're here to walk alongside the church, if I could put it that way.
Okay. So you want to be able to, churches that want to get involved, or maybe it's encouraging churches to get involved in things like, and things like, hey, this is not only the classes, not only grief share and those sort of things that you have, but also when things come up, hey, can you help with this sort of thing? If this is what your neighbor looks like, is that kind of what, to expose them to that? Because I would imagine, being that I live around here, it's somewhat uncomfortable for someone who's never been in a Reformed church or any church setting to like that. It would be uncomfortable to go into a place like that and be like kind of looked at a little bit.
Yeah. That's something that definitely people that we serve, we walk through the process of there are seasons of life, and sometimes there are seasons when you need to be served, and there are often times in your life where you can serve. Needing help or needing to be served doesn't mean you're less than or unimportant or you're messed up.
No, that's fair.
It could be a season of life.
Sure.
A lot of people that we encounter, because we work with probably, a lot of people ask me how many people are church that you deal with. And if I had to guess, I would say maybe half come from church, would say they're affiliated with a church, and half aren't.
Okay.
So the flip side of that is, how can we, if you're not affiliated with a church, maybe they've been hurt by the church, maybe they... Just so many
there can be a lot of different
ways
things, certainly,
to understand that. But we would then be able to say, how can we bring Christ into that person's life?
Sure.
And maybe encourage them. A lot of people we have helped, it would be like, would you like to be a part of a church? Would you like to talk to a pastor?
Mm-hmm.
We can help you with that.
We can help that
Do you
connection
have
happen.
a background? Maybe, well, my grandma was Lutheran,
Sure.
or my friend was Catholic, and I have something in that realm of understanding where we could start. We pray with people that we talk to on the phone, and some people will say, nobody's ever prayed for me before.
Right.
I didn't even know people did that, you know? And it seems foreign around here, but I think you would agree with me that when people say to me, who are you helping? Like, who are these people? And I don't see anybody. Okay, well then you might be missing something.
Yeah, you're probably not looking, right?
You're not looking, or you're not aware. And sometimes it's with the churches. We present them, hey, these are some things.
Yeah.
Can you help with this? They're not in your church. Churches around here, I love the church.
Yeah.
It's challenging at times, but I do love the church. But sometimes they just aren't seeing it. And if you give them the opportunity, they usually get right on board with helping.
Yeah.
So the church is a blessing. So we mobilize churches, and then the next part of our mission is for transformed lives.
Yeah.
And I believe that they say it takes like 30 days to change a habit, or like if you want to walk or drink so much water a day, that's change. And to me, transformation is different. Transformation includes Christ.
Yeah.
And we want to see people, learn about budgeting and finances, or how to set healthy boundaries, but how do we do that in the light of Christ?
Mm-hmm.
And what does God say about our finances? What does God say about healthy boundaries? Or what does God say about processing grief? All of those things.
Yeah.
So we incorporate scripture and prayer
I think
into all of those things.
That's
and
necessary.
You're well aware of that.
Yeah, no, that's not. Well, that's necessary. I think if you're going to have someone who's going through a difficult time in whatever area of life it is, like to be able to say, hey, this is a renewal that can happen through the Holy Spirit, through your belief in what God is providing for you, and how that can look around. Yeah,
and honestly, the biggest. The last part of the mission is in the name of Christ. And so that's what we're talking about. But one of the things I've learned over, 13 years, I guess, maybe, something like that now, is how blessed I was to grow up in a home where I had a mom and a dad, where I was brought to church. I went to vacation Bible school. I had a chance to go to a Lutheran grade school, and I had grandparents and family. And one of the hardest things on our connection form that we ask questions is, who are your people? Like, who do you call if you have a problem? And that's one of the hardest things I learned when I was in the call center role was, I don't know. I can't think of anybody. And in my mind, I would be like, you can't think of one person? And I really wrestled with the job at first. It was hard for me. And I struggled with it because it just brings... So I'm a part of a church I wasn't seeing either, right?
Yeah.
I had to realize that, what am I been missing? Because my eyes weren't open. And I'm thankful to the Lord for bringing me to that point. It was hard.
Yeah.
And rather than give up, I dug in and I thought,
that takes some self-reflection.
Then Lord, use me
wow.
where you can use me. I was required when I started to read the book When Helping Hurts.
Okay.
And I really had a hard time with that book. And I would go back to my executive director and I'm like, I don't like this book. And she's like, read the book, take one chapter at a time. Sometimes I could barely get a chapter. It would be a page and I would have to stop, and I started journaling through it. Because yes, I learned a lot about poverty and generational poverty through that book, but I learned, God convicted my heart to say, I've been a church person all my life. I grew up with all of these blessings. I've had challenges in my life, of course, but my base and foundation was great. And I was convicted that I wasn't fully realizing what God needed me to do. It was asking of me as a follower of Him.
Yeah. So one of the things that I did want to get to was sort of the overlap or the way that Justice for All and Love Inc. work together. I know it pretty well. You know it pretty well, but share with folks kind of how that fits into what the mission of Love Inc. is and how those things kind of work together.
So like I said to you before, I wasn't certainly at Love Inc. from the start. We're 37 years, I believe, in. But I've been there for 13 years. So the history of it, from what I have been told from different people in Rock Valley, that initially when I think they started about roughly the same time. We'll have to dig deeper into that.
I know more about JFA in the sense of I know there was a group of guys that went to Jackson in 1979.
Yep.
And then when they got back, had decided to start taking serve trips down there, essentially.
Right.
So in the spring of 80, ever since the spring of 1980, there's been someone's gone down to Jackson every year, and through that, the accumulation of stuff, right? Like, hey, we should bring this down there to let them that, and so that that sort of started over the course of, 40 plus years now, but that's sort of how Justice for All has started, was to help with some possessions, some sort of things, and then it evolved into the warehouse ministry, and there was an over amount of stuff, and in the late 90s built the warehouse. Like, that's kind of how that happened. So I don't know when it started. I don't know when Love Inc. started in Rock Valley.
I think it was started. They started talking with Love Inc. National in 86.
Okay.
Oh boy, I'm bad at math.
That's all right.
We could do the math later. But about sometime in the mid 80s, I think, and then there was a group of people from Rock Valley that went to Michigan to meet with Love Inc. National people. Okay. And came back. And a lot of Love Inc. affiliates have what they call a resale store.
Oh.
And have their own...
so like a secondhand store where they would sell stuff. Okay.
Yep. And then a lot have furniture ministries.
Sure.
So I know from way back with discussions that Love Inc. here in Sioux County, that piece they felt could be worked out with JFA.
Yeah.
And so then those conversations began. So that's why the Sioux County affiliate did not go that route with furniture, because instead they saw the vision of partnering with another nonprofit.
Sure. Okay.
Which many other affiliates do.
Sure.
Same with the secondhand store. We have how many in Rock Valley? And so, but a lot of, like the Canton affiliate has a resale store, and that feeds a lot into their budget.
I was going to say, that helps their overall number.
Yep.
I would imagine.
So that's where Love Inc. can look different wherever you place it. I think the framework of Love Inc. works whether you set it in a rural setting, an urban setting. It absolutely works because there's large affiliates in large cities.
Okay.
Obviously, we're rural. But again, they just look at like what's around you there. Then who can you partner with? What's available. And so I think that's been the piece that's been huge for Love Inc. is when we get those calls, there are these tangible needs, beds, couches, these types of things, household items. Sometimes it's just sheets and things. Yeah. Where that's our connection big time. It's very important for us. Yeah. Yeah.
And we have that all the time. Like, people are dropping off possessions. Like that's like when I talk with folks about Justice for All, it's like the one thing that most everybody knows is like, well, that's where I bring stuff. When I'm done with it, if it's in good shape, I'll bring it there and I'll drop it off, and then they can pass it on to someone else. And that's what the warehouse ministry, caring and sharing, that's kind of what that's about.
Right.
So we don't only ship it to different places around the country and different partner ministries, certainly through Love Inc. So that's kind of I guess y'all would receive the call and say, hey, I guess maybe that'd be a good idea now that I'm thinking about it. Just kind of, if someone calls in to Love Inc., how does, just step me through that if you don't mind.
So they'll go through what's called a connection process, and that does not matter what you're asking for or
Okay.
you're presenting your need to be. It's for everybody that calls in. So everybody, we ask to go through that. And that is, first of all, getting obviously basic information.
Sure.
But then it's that next piece of, okay, what's the need that you're presenting? So just say that is a bed, for example.
Yep.
We might have relationship with them, but they might be a new neighbor that we're dealing with that we haven't before. So the connection process helps us to understand kind of the overall situation. So that...
So are there like background questions, like how long have you been in this city, or who,
so we
or
try to
age, or
understand-
yeah, I guess what, if you don't
we
mind.
try to understand their situation, and very easily people might say, "Hey, I moved, and I did not have the means to move all of my stuff," or it might be, we've had it where there's been something with the bed, maybe it's shot.
Sure.
We need something different.
Or maybe it's a domestic situation where someone's moving out of some place.
That's
Those are
absolutely
things that I'm
happened
sure that happen as well.
Absolutely. So there could be a lot of those things. So it's kind of just trying to peel back a few of those
Yeah.
layers. Our point of that is to build relationship. We don't want to just be giving things out. I think you would agree with me. That's not what Christ asked us to do, right? He asked us to form relationships, and through those relationships, you can meet needs, and that's important.
Yeah.
But it's not. They can't be separated in my mind. They have to be joined together.
Sure.
And so
Yep.
it's understanding that, because usually a presented need, food, bed,
Sure.
whatever, there's so many things underneath that that are feeding that. And so what we want to do is get to, how can we get to that overall place of health where I say I don't want necessarily people to have to need Love Inc. forever to get things.
Sure.
Relationship is one thing, but I would
Yeah.
love to see them be healthy in that area, and then grow in your relationship and understanding of who God is, and how that plays a part of it. And so the church is a big part of that as well.
It would have to be. The
yes,
church, I guess I
huge
see
part.
the church is where people are, right?
Yep.
Like, and if people are willing to
Yeah.
try to start a relationship or be in a relationship with somebody, like, yeah, I think ultimately that's where the deepest change is going to happen.
Right. Yeah. So we want to balance that meeting needs, but not leaving a person or labeling person that they needed something.
Sure.
Because we all have needs.
That's tricky.
So
That's tricky.
that's a very big balance of when could we be helping,
Yep.
and when could we actually be doing something that's impeding what God is doing in that person's life. That's a very weighty question that I feel we wrestle with every day, and I feel
bet.
as long as I'm on this earth, I will wrestle with.
Yeah, that's that's
And that's okay.
well, yeah, and we're not, because we're not God, right?
Right.
Like, we're not. I'm trying to. We're here trying to do His work,
Right.
And the things
Yeah.
that He has planned. So,
Yeah.
what does that look like with, if I give this person something, is it going to turn around and bite me, or am I holding it over their head, or like, yeah, that I can see
Yeah.
where that would be a challenge, because to see people for just as a person is difficult without seeing the lens of whatever there is a need, or whatever the thing they're struggling with, and then looking at yourself going, golly, I kind of struggle with this too, or I
Yeah.
struggle in this way, and how is that impeding the way I see this person, and what does that look like? So it's a constant putting yourself aside.
And a lot of it is countercultural. I don't want to pick on Sioux County, but countercultural to an area where often we want things to look a certain way, whether they are that way or not. And that's
Sure.
that's sinful human nature. I want to present myself in a way, and we want to kind of cut through that. So a lot of that with our team has been understanding our strengths and weaknesses, sharing our stories with each other, but then saying, because all of us have stuff.
Oh yeah, everybody's got stuff.
And there's things about you that I don't know
Yep.
that you've been through, and vice versa.
For sure.
Oftentimes being able to share that and say, hey, you know what? I'm broken too.
Mm-hmm.
And I really have learned that that's almost like, don't put myself on a higher playing field than somebody has a need. I have needs too. And so putting ourselves on an even playing field and saying, without Christ, I'm broken and lost as well.
Yeah.
I've been broken in my life. I've had very deep-seated issues in my life
Sure.
and my family. But let's just be who we are. Let's be real. We both need Jesus, and we both have had hard times. But let's not let that keep us stuck. How can we help you move forward? How would you like to move forward? I've had people that have done that in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes that's the role we can play is, if you're not happy with where you are, then how can God's people surround you to say, we want you to be able to do better. God wants you to do better.
Yeah.
And if you do too, then we're together and we can do it. It's a journey.
Let's do it together.
But we can do it together. Yep.
There's a lot of, I would imagine, a lot of up and downs that happen.
There are.
There's a lot of up and downs in life, but I would think in this line of work of taking phone calls from people who are in a tough spot, that you ask the question, who do you have that we can call on, or if the case is an emergency, and they go, I don't think I have anyone. That would be...
That's a tough spot.
That would be a
tough
that'd
thing
be tough.
to hear.
Yeah.
And I had to process through that. I did that role for 6.5 years, or almost 7. So I became director in January of 2017.
Oh, yeah.
And I do believe that working my way through that role has helped me do my current role more effectively.
Yeah.
And it's helped me understand. I'm a little bit more removed now from that
Sure.
side of it.
Yeah.
But I will never remove myself from it, because when they come into Love Inc., they need to know that we all care whatever role we play. I am not at a role. I call myself team leader.
Sure.
I guess I have the executive director
that is
thing,
the title,
but
hey?
I prefer team leader.
Yeah.
Because we truly are a team. And in our prayer time this morning and most weeks, I just am so thankful that for this season, God has placed the right people together. And we are able to work together. I don't know if that's how it will always be.
There'll probably be ups and downs.
Ups and downs. But right now, I just give God a lot of glory for that. I feel very blessed.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I don't have a ton else, as I think we kind of covered, what the mission is.
Mm-hmm.
We've covered the Justice for All Love Inc. relationship. Mm-hmm. We got a little background on you. You have any questions for me? I haven't done this before. Yeah, I know. It's something a little bit different about Justice for All as a ministry. I don't want that to be a thing. I know about our ministry really well, but I don't know that. I don't want to assume everyone knows everything.
No, I feel I have a good insight into JFA with my role at Love Inc., but our church is very involved, and Corwin is a part of my church. Yep. And I probably knew more about JFA when I started at Love Inc. than I did Love Inc.
Oh, okay.
To be honest.
Sure.
Yeah. So just know a lot of different people that volunteer. And so I've learned about it that way. And just being involved together in the community. I certainly don't know the ins and outs of every day of your life.
No,
but I probably
fine.
have a little bit more understanding of it than maybe because we are in work together.
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm like I said, I'm very grateful for that piece. I'm kind of glad I don't have to manage a furniture warehouse. I would probably not be very good at that. So it's a real blessing. And I'll say this is when our staff heard that Corwin was leaving, we all sat in a moment and we truly felt kind of sad.
Yeah.
And so I thought, but that's kind of cool, because I know Pat, the call center coordinator, and Corwin they joke with each other, and she just said, wow, I'm just really going to miss that connection.
Yeah.
And so that's what's awesome about it. It's, yes, we have ministries and all of this, but we just have the same heart, I think, to serve others.
I agree. And Corwin will be missed very much.
He'll be missed in our church too.
I believe that. I believe it.
Yes.
So,
and Carla.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your willingness to come on and to share about it. It's, you were saying it. It's not easy to just put it out there. It's easy to let people think or let people see what you want them to see, but being able to say, hey, listen, this is what I struggle with in getting past myself and putting myself and how I view things aside and saying, what is this person, where are they at? And being able to see that. And my wife and I talk about that on a somewhat regular basis, just with having to say, looking inward first versus looking at, how can you fix your problem? Like I don't have problems. Like my wife gets after me a little bit, which is great about a marriage,
Right.
that she can call me out because I need to be called out too,
Yeah, me too.
and saying, hey, you're not upholding what God wants you to be, and it's difficult, but that is certainly something that's needed.
Yeah. And I think, I often joke that if I looked back, I'm like, oh, I would have gone to Dort for like a social work degree,
Okay.
something like that. I didn't. I considered going back to school some years ago, and then unfortunately at that time, my son had a pretty tragic accident. So I feel like God rerouted me. But my joke is I should be grandfathered in. I feel like I should have a master's
Yeah.
degree. But
In
I'm
social
thankful
work, yeah.
that God has gifted me with the heart that I needed.
Yeah.
Possibly I could have used more training. I don't know. It is what it is at this point. I've decided I'm not.
It's real
not
world
going
training.
back.
It's experiential training.
It's real life experience. But
Yeah.
I'm thankful that He gave me the heart and the willingness to learn it.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that because it's been a journey and it's not all been easy. But I love my work. I'm thankful that I can serve in this way for this time.
I'm glad to hear that. And as a representative of Justice for All, I am, glad that you are in the position you're in and knowing the relationship that our ministries have together and the ways, even with some changes with Corwin and that sort of thing. But I think
we'll work through that.
Knowing the heart of each of us and where we see the ministries fit, I think is going to be, something that can't be squished and it's not going to be set aside for anything either. So.
Yeah. And I'll pray that God brings the right person for you too.
We'll have interviews here shortly.
That's great. The Lord provides, and I know you know that. And we waited for our call center person for 8 months.
Yeah.
And when that came about, and she came in, I'm like, now I get why God asked me to wait. I am not big on waiting.
No.
I always have to wait.
I feel
like the Lord's teaching me all the time.
It's
you're going
hard.
to learn this, girl, and I'm 53, so I need to learn it, here. But when we talked about her journey, because I had talked to her 8 months prior, because someone had given me her name, and in her life, she had some personal things going on and some hard stuff, and she said no, and I'm like, okay. Well, I went through, I interviewed, there was a few, I'm like, it's not the right person, and it has to be, and they realized it too. But there we waited, and then this person comes back 8 months later and now is in the position, but I'm like, I get it. I know why you were asking me to wait. I didn't like it.
No.
But I get it now.
Right, which is,
It's okay.
At this point, it's okay, but...
And God's timing is perfect, and it is very rarely what I think it should be.
It's probably not what I think it should be. Like that's the thing. Like I feel
like that's a thing.
I'm talking to the people on staff, and I'm like, hey, here's the contingency plan, and I don't know what's going to happen. I know God has it figured out, and it's hard for me to not want to just put the things in line because I want it to work this way, but I can say it that I know it's not going to work out the way I want it to necessarily, but still having to work through that is difficult. So
we're learning and growing all the time. So
nonstop change.
Right.
So all right. Well, thank you very much again. Like I say, I appreciate your ministry. I appreciate the perspective, your heart. All of those things. That's I'm glad to know that, honestly. And
ditto.
and so we'll be in touch certainly in the future. This is Debbie, Executive Director at Love in the Name of Christ here in Sioux County. I'm Joel, Executive Director at Justice for All. Thank you very much for watching, and God bless.